Hello everyone, Mrs. Red here. I have another video to show you today. It is of a Matchbox Mini, so we're going to get into it quite soon because it's about 32 minutes worth. Here is the little toy Mini here, so just to give you an indication of size, little Matchbox Mini, and that is the still life that I am going to be doing today. So I've been at a business breakfast this morning and networking, so hence the full face of makeup, etc. So I thought, hey, jump on camera, say hello. So I will now go through to the video. Enjoy. So like I said, this is a long video. It actually, when I downloaded the recordings, it was 2.5 hours worth. So the fact that I've been able to condense it into 32 minutes took some time, but no, it didn't really. I just cut out all the actual paint mixing that that happened because I was just like keeping the recording going while I was mixing a new colour. And the other thing I've done is sped up the video, obviously. So yes, the little Matchbox Mini, 1970 is the time that it was produced, the actual Matchbox Mini. And it is a friend of mine who has given it to me to paint, and I am then returning the favour by sending him a t-shirt with the painting on it. So that's all part of my new Etsy store called Grand Old Car. So I've been able to combine my two loves of classic cars and painting and drawing, and actually work on some projects that are just for me rather than if you follow me, I do a lot of art teaching. So a lot of the projects that I'm always working on are stuff that others can then follow along and do as well. So this is me just painting for me, not having to worry about turning it into a lesson plan. Yeah, I get totally immersed in it. I just go into a beautiful bubble that I don't want to come out of. So the idea, I guess that I was starting to paint classic cars to put into the Etsy store, and Chris showed me this little, he sent me a photo of the little Matchbox Mini, and I just thought I need to paint that little Mini. So I took some photos of it so that I got the angle. I have done the sketch up before I hit record because that is always a very light sketch to begin with, and you know, I made a lot of errors like we all do when you're trying to draw something up, get it to scale, get the perspective right, all of that, and it probably turned out, the sketch probably turned out larger, probably twice the size than what I had originally anticipated. So this has been done in my Winsor Newton Watercolour Sketchbook, which is A4 in size, and it is about 300 GSM, I think, warm pressed paper, and it's got an interleaf between each page, so a piece of tracing paper which has been bound into the book so that your paintings on both sides of the paper are not rubbing against each other. And I do love that about that book. So yeah, A4 in size, and I sketched up the still life of the Mini. I didn't really know whether this was going to be just one type of media or whether it was going to be a mixed media piece. So I'm working in gouache, and with gouache you can paint in layers with gouache, but you've got to go from a very thin layer up to a layer without or very little water on your brush. So that's why I was able to do that yellow wash where you can still see all the pencil lines coming through. So I have managed to stay with gouache for the whole painting. Didn't end up using any coloured pencils, which I probably thought I would. They're certainly sitting there waiting to go, but no, didn't actually use it. Doesn't mean to say that I won't do the next one and go back to a different style again. No restrictions on it, but yes, I am going to do a series of the Matchbox cars in their current state, which this little guy was produced in 1970, which I think I mentioned earlier. So 53 years old now, and had so much playtime from my friend, and then he passed all the cars on to his nephew, and it was his nephew giving them back that he then did a spring clean, and I am a total mini nut, so that's why he sent me a photo of his little Matchbox Mini, and I never owned a little Matchbox Mini when we were growing up, so I'm very, very fortunate and envious to be able to paint this little Matchbox car. Surprisingly, they don't actually get a lot of money for anyone who is actually trying to sell them when they're all dinged up. And I don't even think like one that hasn't come out of the box that's 50 years old really fetches anything too much either. So they're better to remain with the person, I think, rather than giving them away. But I think the idea of being able to paint the Mini and then pass it back to my friend as a t-shirt is a beautiful little gift for him. And it's also it's on the Etsy store, so anyone who is a Matchbox car lover would be able to purchase one of these paintings. I'm doing a Dodge Challenger next, so I don't know if you know what that looks like, but yeah, that's going to be the next one. Anyway, a bit more on this one. I'm not going to rattle on for 32 minutes, by the way. There's just no way I could. I will explain the painting process, and then I'll throw it to a bit of music for you to enjoy. So in regards to the painting, I explained that I didn't know what process I was going to use, whether it was going to be a mixed media, and also just to touch back on using the gouache. When at the end of the video, you will see what I mean by gouache reactivating. So when gouache dries, and it dries quite quickly, it's a water-based paint, and it's usually an opaque paint, meaning that you don't see the paint lines. If you use it with minimal water, just enough for the brush to be damp, you won't see any of the paint lines at all. It just dries completely flat and quite matte. There's no gloss to it at all. However, if you're going to use it as a layer paint, and you can do either way, you can just use it as a one layer, very flat colour paint, or you can use it how I am in this example. So I started it off as a very, very thin watercolour-y wash, and then you can build on top of the layers, but every layer you put down, you have to become thicker and thicker and thicker to the point that the paintbrush is damp, and it doesn't have to be wet, it just has to be damp, and then that's the last layer. And depending on how thin your first few layers are will depend on how many layers you can get out of gouache. But for this one, I think the most layers I probably did was 4 or 5, and there are some areas that got 2 to 3 layers, like the top of the roof, the bonnet. They just didn't require much detail at all in them. Inside the vehicle, with the seats, the colour wasn't getting right, and also the looking through the back window was also, I just wasn't getting the colour right. So I was getting a bit nervous, because I know with gouache is you do have a maximum amount of layers before it just becomes a boggy mess. So reactivation gouache reactivates, and if you don't know what that means, when the paint is dry and you then apply another layer, if that layer is thinner than the last layer, the paint is going to reactivate, meaning it's going to pick up, it's going to lift again. And you'll see that happen at the end of this video. The windscreen I painted last, and I think I may have been hoping that the windscreen would just paint itself. So I was a bit scared to paint the window, or the windscreen, because it's just, it was just scary, and it did require that translucent look. Yet I had done all the layers in gouache, and I knew that I wasn't able to actually put a translucent wash down over the top of it. It does pick up the paint underneath, but as it turned out, it worked really nicely. It really worked. It looks right. There's reflection in the windscreen, and it's all come together. So this bit that I'm painting now, that is the second layer, and that is a pretty thick layer of paint. So I kind of knew that I wasn't really going to be needing to do any more to the sides of the car, the bonnet or the roof. It's more the details in around the lining and where all that paint is chipped off. But the top layers, being the grey that I've put in, is all quite thick, so there was no worry about reactivation happening there either. And that's the beauty of gouache. So I hope that has given you a bit of insight into a gouache painting as opposed to, say, an acrylic painting. You can now buy acrylic gouache, and I do have some of those colours. Liquitex sells it. I don't know if there's any other suppliers that sell it. I haven't used it a lot though, so I need to get them out and do one of the, I don't know, with the still lives, whether I should do all of them, the Matchbox the Matchbox cars, whether all the still lifes should just be done in gouache, because I really do enjoy using gouache. It's a really good illustrator's paint. But I also am interested in actually putting some backgrounds on as well. So I think what I'll do in regards to the t-shirts and caps, etc., in the Etsy store, I will paint the still life like I have here, no background at all. Then I'll scan that artwork in, and then I'll go and paint a background, and it might just be a fading colour that just fades out into the background, and then that way I've got one car, two completely different designs, and it's a lot less editing of in Photoshop having to remove a background that I don't want. Now what else? I've explained that, so 2.5 hours of footage, and I only filmed half of it. So I'd say that this is a 5-hour sketch. It is in my sketchbook, so is that correct for a sketchbook artwork to be 5 to 6 hours worth? Who knows? There's no actual answer to that. There's no right answer. The fact that I've used my sketchbook was more so that I didn't have to feel like I had to do a really good job of it. It was an experiment. It may have not worked, but it did work, and I absolutely loved it. Loved the process. So there's lots more of this coming. How am I going for time now? Well, that's not too bad. I've rattled on for 14 minutes, so that's really good. So I might put some music on, just some nice chilled vibes. Don't know what I'm going to choose yet. And then I'll come back at the end of the video and just, it will be when we're doing the windscreen, which is the scary bit. Actually, the one bit that really did nearly do my head in was the front tyre. So I've already painted in that back tyre. When I did the black wash on the front tyre, the pencil lines, even though you can see them there, the pencil lines just disappeared. And I was left with this black shape that I had to then repaint in a tyre that looked correct. I have started, I am recording the first bit of it, but then I turn the recording off and just deal with it. And yeah, it took me a long time to get that tyre correct because I was basically starting from scratch again. Just had the outline and had to put everything back in correctly. So note to self, next time I do this, I will make lines a lot darker because you're never going to see them once you've got all those layers done in gouache. You do see your pencil lines through watercolour, and watercolour is what I use a lot of. So I guess that's the mindset I went in with, is that I'll see the line underneath, but I didn't. All right, I will turn it over to music and be back at the end. Enjoy. All right, so there we go. I hope that that music that I put on didn't put you to sleep. and that it wasn't annoying either. I don't think it was annoying, but it could have been a bit too relaxing at the same time. So yes, I'm on to, am I, or have I? Yeah, I think I've just done a bit of the windscreen, and I'm about to finish it off with a few little highlights. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please make sure that you do subscribe, because I'm going to be putting up at least 1 or 2 a month. And enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.